Have you ever imagined what it means to be born in Dubai's endless wealth? There are rich kids, and then there are kids who grow up in a world where being rich stops feeling like being rich. Imagine being 15 and having a Ferrari you can't legally drive, walking past a tiger before breakfast, having global superstars show up at your home. And the strangest part? None of those things are particularly strange to you because Rashed Belhasa wasn't introduced to wealth later in life. He was born inside it, and once you understand what normal looked like to this kid, some of the most ridiculous things he owned suddenly start making sense. To understand the boy, you have to understand what he was born into. Not a fortune, an operation. His father, Saif Ahmed Belhasa, didn't inherit his money quietly and disappear into it. He built one of Dubai's largest business empires from the ground up, stretching across construction, hospitality, automotive, finance. A footprint so wide, it's hard to name a single industry in the city it hasn't touched. Somewhere in that empire is a fleet of vehicles in the hundreds, just sitting in inventory, the way another company might stock office chairs. Alongside Rashed are two brothers, Abdullah and Mayed, and a mother, Sarah. All of them living inside the same machine. Because that's really what this is, not a windfall. A machine running continuously that had already been running for years before Rashed was old enough to understand what any of it meant. Think about what that timing does. Most people who eventually become wealthy get to watch it happen. They remember the year before the money and the year after. They have a before to measure the after against. Rashed never had a before. The machine was already at full output on the day he was born, which means he never experienced wealth as a change. It was simply the climate he existed in. And nobody questions the climate they grew up in. They just call it normal. Rashed didn't win a lottery. He was born into infrastructure. That distinction matters because everything that follows isn't a story about luck striking once. It's a story about what it does to a child to grow up standing permanently inside the overflow of something built before he existed. Start with the house itself, because house is already the wrong word. Somewhere inside it, alongside the bedrooms and the kitchens, is something closer to a private zoo. Lions, tigers, a cheetah that for a while wandered the property like a family dog with better reflexes, a giraffe, tall enough to look into a second-floor window if it wanted to. For most families, an unexpected dog in the yard is a small crisis. In this house, a full-grown big cat padding past the pool was Tuesday. Try to imagine the version of childhood where that's true. Somewhere else in the world, a kid is being told to stop feeding the neighbor's cat because they're not allowed a pet. In this house, the question was never, can we have an animal? It was closer to, which animal and how many? The scale is almost impossible to hold on to because the human brain isn't built to file tiger under ordinary. And yet, somewhere very early on, that's exactly what happened to Rashed. Wildlife documentary and childhood home stopped being two different categories. They were just one place, his place, but the animals aren't even the strangest part. The strangest part is who else walked through that same house. For most people, meeting one global superstar is a story you tell for the rest of your life. The one photo, the one shaky-handed hello, replayed at every family dinner afterward, framed and hung somewhere, brought up unprompted years later. In Rashed's house, that same moment happened on a loop. Cristiano Ronaldo came through as a guest. So did Lionel Messi. So did Nicki Minaj. Floyd Mayweather didn't just visit. He got the full tour, walked through the same rooms an ordinary fan would trade a decade of savings to stand inside for 5 minutes. Paul Pogba, Cardi B. Names that function as entire personality traits for other people. I met so-and-so once. Were just faces that showed up, said hello, and left. Here's what makes that stranger than the animals. A tiger doesn't choose to be there. It's property, however extraordinary. But Cristiano Ronaldo chose to walk through that door. Lionel Messi chose to be a guest in that house. These are people the entire planet organizes its attention around. And in Rashed's world, they were the ones doing the visiting, which quietly flips the usual power dynamic of fame on its head. Normally, ordinary people orbit the famous. In this house, for a few hours at a time, it was the other way around. Somewhere in there, the idea of a celebrity encounter as a life event quietly stopped applying to him. It's one thing to own something extraordinary. It's another thing entirely for extraordinary people to treat your living room as a normal place to be. Then there are the cars. And this is where the story gets interesting, because it's not really about the cars at all. A Rolls-Royce, a Lamborghini Aventador, a Ferrari. For most teenagers, a car isn't just transportation. It's the first real object that says, I did something. I earned something. I'm becoming someone. First job, first paycheck, first car. That sequence is practically a rite of passage. Rashed skipped the sequence. The supercars weren't milestones. They were background objects. Mentioned almost in passing, the emotional weight of a bicycle. And that's the actual story hiding inside the Ferrari. Not the number on the price tag, but the fact that a machine most adults will never own in their lifetime carried, for him, none of the meaning it's supposed to carry. When a symbol stops meaning anything, that tells you more about the person than the symbol ever could. So if the cars didn't move him, what did? Wait for a second. If you're enjoying this glimpse into Rashed's world, subscribe to Glimfury. We've got plenty more extraordinary stories to take you inside, and this one is far from over. So if the cars didn't move him, what did? Sneakers. Long before Money Kicks was a brand or a channel name, it was just a kid's actual obsession, and not in the casual way most people like shoes. His personal collection, by the time he was still a teenager, operated at a scale that made most adults' entire closets look like a rounding error. This is the first real crack of light into who Rashed was underneath the environment. Not what his family had given him, but what he, personally, chose to chase. And what he chose to chase was still, unmistakably, more. At 13, he did something that most 13-year-olds never think to do. He pointed a camera at his own life. In 2013, he launched the YouTube channel that would become Money Kicks and started filming the sneaker showcases, the sneaker talk interviews, the small slices of a childhood that, to him, felt completely unremarkable. That's the detail worth sitting with. He wasn't performing wealth for an audience. He was documenting what already felt like Tuesday to him, and the rest of the world watched it like science fiction. Think about how strange that transaction actually is. A 13-year-old films himself doing what feels, to him, like nothing at all. Talking about shoes, showing a car, saying hello to whoever happened to be over that week. And on the other side of the screen, millions of strangers watch it, like they've been let backstage at a life they didn't know existed. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He genuinely didn't have the reference point to know what would look impressive, because he'd never lived any other way. The camera didn't create the fascination. It just pointed at something that was already there, waiting to be noticed. Millions of subscribers followed, not because he was selling a fantasy, but because he was accidentally leaking a reality nobody outside that house had ever seen from the inside. And here's where the story could have stopped being interesting, where rich kid with a camera could have been the whole thing. Instead, he kept building. He launched his own streetwear label, King's Ambition, put his name on products, partnered with brands like Sprayground on his own accessory line. None of that needed to happen. A kid with unlimited access to everything has very little practical reason to build anything of his own. There's no scarcity pushing him toward it, no fear of running out, none of the usual pressure that turns people into entrepreneurs out of necessity. And yet he kept starting things anyway, which complicates the easy read of him as simply a passenger in his father's wealth. Rashed's own, personally built net worth, the sneakers, the brand, the channel, all of it combined, lands somewhere in the low millions, which sounds enormous, until you remember it's a rounding error next to the empire he was born into. That gap is the story. He was, by every visible measure, still just riding the momentum of a machine he didn't build, but he was also, unmistakably, trying to make something that was smaller, slower, and entirely his own. Which brings us to the one place none of it could follow him. Boxing doesn't care who your father is. It doesn't care about the zoo, the guest list, the sneakers, or the brand deals. Rashed stepped into the ring as an amateur fighter. There was even talk, at one point, of an exhibition against Floyd Mayweather himself, the same man who'd once walked through his house as a guest, tour and all. That detail alone says something. The guest from the living room becomes, in another context, the opponent across the ring. And in that context, none of the old rules apply. Whatever happens in a boxing ring can't be bought, gifted, or inherited. Nobody can buy him a faster jab. Nobody can wire in better footwork. You either take the hit or you don't. You either win the round or you don't. For someone who had never, in his entire life, encountered a real no, a genuine wall that money couldn't move, the ring might be the first honest mirror he'd ever stood in front of. And maybe that's exactly why he kept stepping back into it. And that's the moment the whole story quietly turns. Because none of it, not the tiger on the way to breakfast, not the guest list of icons, not the cars that meant nothing to him, was ever actually the point. Those were just the visible edges of something much harder to photograph. A childhood with no version of "we can't afford that." No moment of wanting something and being told to wait. No ceiling, ever, at any point, on anything. That absence doesn't show up in a single object. It shows up in the accumulation of every object meaning less than it should have. That's the real inheritance. Not the money itself, but the quiet erosion of the instinct the rest of us build our entire relationship with money around. So picture him again. 15 years old, walking past the tiger enclosure, phone in hand, thinking about nothing in particular. Not because he's spoiled, not because he's ungrateful, because extraordinary was never a word his environment gave him permission to use about his own life. It was just home, which leaves you with the only question that actually matters here. What would you find boring if nothing had ever been out of reach? And if you enjoyed stepping inside a world this far removed from ordinary life, subscribe to Glimfury. We'll see you in the next story.